February 8th, 2024. I'll get it. Might take a minute. Operation Long Jap is in full swing. Hope everybody's doing well. I don't know if we're going to have as much fun as we had last night. Calm Down Charlie and Stingfoot was pretty good. And so it's best to watch my videos in the first 12 hours, because after 12 hours they change my video. So last night's video was 2 hours, 3 minutes, 13 seconds. 24 views and 34 likes. I'm not sure how that works. Had 125 people show up to the stream. Got 24 views. And it went from 13 seconds to 20 seconds. So the video gained an extra 7 seconds after 12 hours. And so the nuclear industry has been doing this to my videos. It doesn't. We notice it doesn't do it to anybody else's videos. Let me go backwards a second. So everybody says 3 Mile Island, United States, is the worst nuclear accident the United States has ever had. In 1959, Santa Susana was 460 times more radiation released than at 3 Mile Island, and is regarded as the worst nuclear accident in U.S. history, but it's been omitted the entire time. They still refer to 3 Mile Island. And this was a sodium reactor. Comparisons with x-rays and CAT scans are meaningless because the industry likes to compare it to bananas and potato chips. And if you push enough buttons, they'll mention x-rays and CAT scans. Inhaling particles, and we had 20 million iodine particles in America, Canada and United States. There's a Canadian study after Fukushima per liter of rainfall. Inhaling particles increases radiation exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. By a factor of 1 trillion. And Chris Sarkowski had downplayed the 20 million atoms, particles, and said it was equal to 10 counts per minute or some retarded number. It was actually, the particle is unbelievable. It's a physical piece of the reactors, right? So it's unbelievable. These are hot particles. So you notice they'll say hot, they don't say hot atoms, they say hot particles. Congenital heart disease operation rose 14% after Fukushima nuclear accident. I got a text and somebody wanted to see the study themselves and asked me could I put it up there tonight. So this was 2019. There was a 14.2% increase in the number of operations per 100,000 live births for complex congenital heart disease in neonates and infants. In other words, there's 14,200 open heart surgeries per 100,000 live births across Japan. It's a stunning number. And I appreciate that. And you can go look up that story and then you can find the studies. They quote them all there. And so there's another study you might want to check out too. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. And the head of the Tokyo area medical clinic says we're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima radiation. And the first story we're going to cover is this wonderful lady in a moment here. And we've been trying to cover it for about 3 days. And so I made a top priority today, and I apologize for not covering it on the first day. Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust, and the world as we know it has changed, and the effects on our health are incomprehensible. And that's an appropriate way of talking about it. So it's not just our health, it's the species. And so in the tidal zones, All those species to your left are exterminated in British Columbia all the way to California. And now it's just about a naked coastline. It's like the moon now. If you land on the coastline, you'll actually starve to death. Where before there was incredible diversity. I showed a lot more of that last night and early in the video from last night. And you can also find it in my playlist. Cesium, which is just one of 1,000 fission products you're worried about, remains dispersed throughout the water column, the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. They were talking about in Pacific, but it's all oceans. From the surface to the ocean floor. And so wherever you find cesium, there's going to be infinitely more curium and uranium and plutonium, americium, neptunium. So this was, the NRC was given a presentation to the American Congress post-Fukushima. And that was March the 16th. That was the day the last reactor blew up in Japan. And this was a little clip that I haven't played in a long time, so we're overdue for it. I'm just going to check the volume myself before I ring everybody's eardrums. I'll adjust it on my end in real time. And Congress is trying to get an answer from the NRC, and the NRC has a million excuses. It's really something.
We're here to get a briefing on the ongoing crisis associated with the nuclear power plants in Japan. I'm very privileged that we have the executive director for operations at the NRC here, Bill Borchardt.
I couldn't speculate on that.
An expert, a true expert as well.
Again, I wouldn't wish to speculate.
So we feel very blessed that you could come and stand in until the chairman comes, and we really do welcome you.
Again, I can't speculate.
Well, teaching all of us the lessons that we have to take away from what is happening.
I couldn't speculate on that. What we believe is a significant amount of fuel damage in the three operating reactors, units 1, 2, and 3, which were operating at the time of the earthquake. And then because of the spent fuel problems that are in Unit 4 of that reactor facility. All of those factors taken into combination, if that same type of source term, that same type of radiological problem existed in the United States, our recommendation to state governments would be to evacuate out to 50 miles.
Well, that's a really good point, because I'm asking you, do you know how many people live within 50 miles of San Onofre nuclear power plant?
I do not know.
Well, I'm going to tell you how many people. 7.4 million people.
So you got 7.4 million people, but the plume to the right, you can see it covers the planet, and that plume model is based on 20 days. That's from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. And I actually cooked up that video. That video is over 10 years old when I put it together. And the system I used back in that day was called Wirecast. It was a nightmare. It was very resource intensive. The computer I was using wasn't very happy. Sea creatures sick and dying, disappearing at an alarming rate all along the Pacific coast. And some wonder if it's the fallout from Fukushima. That's January 18, 2015. I was actually on the ocean on research expeditions up by Alaska at that point for several months. New York Times, the ocean life faces a mass extinction, and we may be on the precipice of a major extinction event. And my goodness, were they ever right. And obviously, they were quoting my research expeditions because I was the only person out there. And I was living on the ocean for 4 to 5 months each year. Nuclear expert, Fukushima melted fuel is drifting in the ocean on the land and lacking containment, of course, because it's in the ocean, it has none. It ends up on the coastline and blows into the community. People get an exceptional dose, and the health harm will go on for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. Actually, it's tens of thousands of years. Peace activists' anti-nuclear protests outside the White House lasted for a record 34 years. 34 years. And she died at 80 years old in a homeless hospital for homeless women, and dedicated her entire life. She used to be a secretary for an embassy. I guess she heard something in the embassy that motivated her. For over 3 decades, Connie camped in Lafayette Square opposite the White House in Washington, D.C., protesting the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We all owe her a huge thank you. And she's gone, but it's still okay to remember. It's important, really. She moved from Spain to the United States of America in 1960 and maintained the longest peace vigil by an individual in history, spanning 34 years, 177 days, from the 1st of August 1981 until her death, aged 80, on the 25th of January 2016. And although she holds the record, Connie did not start the White House peace vigil. She joined forces with an American anti-nuclear protester, William Thomas, who started to sit-in on the 3rd of June 1981 and remained for 27 years, 234 days, until he passed away on the 23rd of January 2009. And their camp was originally set up adjacent to the White House fence, but it was moved to the opposite side of the street as it violated the new local laws. I think people like this are actual real-life heroes. And when Connie first joined, Ronald Reagan was the president in his first year of presidency. And she was a former embassy secretary in New York. I'm assuming she heard something as a secretary that changed her life. As tents were banned in the dark, Connie and Thomas operated out of a makeshift shelter constructed from a patio umbrella draped in a plastic sheet. And day or night, rain or shine, Connie and Thomas were always there, spreading their message to anyone who would listen. And they survived on donations from passerbys, charities, and local businesses, such as Hardee's, which would give them leftovers. Bless Hardee's. And volunteers also took their places at time, allowing them to take short breaks from the vigil. On one such occasion, in 2013, a volunteer left the site overnight, and the degenerate police removed the encampment. And however, Connie and her supporters were able to redeploy the vigil in a matter of hours. And she knew in many ways it was a hopeless fight, right? But she also knew it was a worthy one, and dedicated her entire life and done without all the trappings that we enjoy. It's quite, it's very impressive, very endearing. They endured confrontations with police, arrests, courtrooms, hearings, jail stays. On one occasion, Thomas, who had married another lady named Ellen, were sentenced to 90 days for violating the National Park Service rules. So Connie continued the vigil alone during the time they were in jail. The activists saw their biggest success in 1993 when they circulated a petition calling for the nuclear disarmament, which resulted in a ballot initiative being passed. And Eleanor Holmes Norton, D.C. congressional delegate at the time, worked with the activists to write a nuclear disarmament and Conversion Act, but the legislation never reached Congress for a vote. She passed away in 2016 at a housing facility operated by N Street Village, a nonprofit that supports homeless women in Washington. And although she was homeless because she sat there in front of the White House and fought for humanity, it's unbelievable, inspiring. Although she no longer is alive, she's no longer alive. The White House Peace Vigil is still going strong and marks its 40th anniversary in 2021, and its message is just as pertinent today as it was when it began. So a huge amount of respect for Connie. I'm sure many people in the anti-nuclear movement would have met her, and anybody that visited the White House would have seen her. And shame on the police for treating them like that when they sacrificed so much for so long. Shame on the government for doing that, for disrespecting humanity that way. Extremely benign people who were motivated by the love of the planet. It's humiliating that the world doesn't remember people like this. Fukushima farmer hopes that ducks will eat up the radiation. ABC Australia. David Sweeney, the Australian Conservation Foundation, who lied about Fukushima so many times, breaks my heart. Redefining costly, unproven new nuclear as clean as dishonest. A Colorado legislative committee recently and appropriately nixed a bill seeking to boost new, unproven nuclear energy technologies by attempting to redefine the fission process as clean energy, which is not. Europe just did, by the way. I'll get to that hopefully coming up. The fact is there are safer, cleaner, cheaper, more readily available ways to power our future and for the state to meet its climate goals. So let's be clear, nuclear power has significant drawbacks. It poses serious health and environmental risks, including contamination from uranium mining, safety and security of reactor operations, nuclear weapons security risk, and associated radioactive cleanup efforts and spent nuclear fuel disposal. The nuclear fuel, when it comes out of the reactor, is still splitting atoms for the next million years. It goes into a fuel pool with no containment, where it hemorrhages radiation into your farms, because they're always surrounded by farms, and poisons everybody for their legacies. It's the only way to describe it is a disease factory. And there's so many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that is frightening that it made it this long without anybody calling them out. Even with subsidies, new nuclear facilities and existing ones cannot compete in the energy markets against renewable energy. New designs for nuclear power plants are decades away, at least from commercial viability. And recent NRDC analysts of a small modular nuclear reactors find even the generous incentives, this concept for new small nuclear facilities, cannot compete against cheaper, proven clean energies like wind, solar, and storage. The U.S. hasn't built any small nuclear reactors, so supporting them is purely speculative. In fact, a decade-long plan to build a country's first commercial small modular reactor in Idaho was canceled last year because cost doubled to $9.3 billion. In fact, the numbers were actually going to be around $20+ billion if they actually had to build them, and it would have been less than half the power of a large reactor. So calling it a scam doesn't quite do it justice. It's evil what they're doing. It's totally hoodwinked, and they stole around $7 billion and got away with it. Some of the investors, by the way, are suing them, but they got away with the majority of it. And because they're on the stock market, they can't be put in jail. All they can do is get a fine. Mining for uranium also uses massive amounts of water, and their state and region faces ongoing drought and desertification. Nearly 64,000 clean energy workers are employed in Colorado across every county. So when they say renewables don't produce jobs, call them what they are, scumbag lawyers. Nuclear power should not be considered an effective low-carbon energy source, a new report showed. So how can they call nuclear carbon when it produced 30 million one-ton bags, and they don't know what to do with it, and which is just 3% of the land that they scratched the surface of? 30 million one-ton bags. Imagine trying to control the keys for 30 million trucks. Deadly prefectures, 14 prefectures in Japan were banned for a decade by 55 countries. How, oh how, can anybody consider that useful? They contaminate the entire planet. Higher Power signs the Nuclear Blast, which is a major record label. And they dropped a music video. Absolute Bloom. And a nuclear blast, of course, think about that statement where you got all these heavy metal kids will go and buy their albums produced by a nuclear blast. So indoctrination comes many ways besides Spider-Man and the Hulk, etc., right? Music is a very powerful tool for brainwashing the vulnerable of our society. 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of leaked water at Fukushima, from a single liter. So you can't just have beta in liters. 3 sieverts is considered a lethal dose to a human. And you're going to have gammas, alphas, neutrons. Just bear with me here. I want to show you something. If I can find it. The tanks at Fukushima were built to manipulate you. They're empty. You can't fill those tanks up, right? Let me tell you the story of Koriyama. Here it is. So in Koriyama, which is about 35 miles away from Fukushima, elementary school in Koriyama in Japan is using water bottles to shield students from radiation. This is an amazing story. An elementary school, folks, elementary, the most vulnerable of society to radiation, by the way. It is located in the Fukushima prefecture, 34 miles, not kilometers, west of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disease factory. Is using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyards, and they probably got the idea from Stinkfoot / Thunderfoot, and other areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water, placed inside the large square boxes which are stacked around the classroom. According to the school, it seemed to have reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3. So outside the school, that's the outdoors, and inside the school is boxes of water to shield the children from the gamma shines, the alpha burst, the beta rays, the neutron bombardments. And you can't shield them from it really because it's airborne. It's not just everywhere, it's also airborne, so you can't avoid breathing it in. And so rather than move the children out of the nuclear wasteland, which is the moral and ethical thing to do, they should never be in that. That city should be abandoned of over 300,000 people. Every building in that community is entitled to be decontaminated, but you can't decontaminate houses or buildings or cities. The residents of Koriyama City are concerned about the high amount of radioactive material which has been found around their town. Their town is surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radiation they picked up. Every single building in the town is considered eligible for radioactive cleanup, and you can't clean it up. And they use the homeless to do it, so it can't be done. This was a study in 2012-13 from UNSCLEAR, which is United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. And they're degenerate monsters. So the first line over there is the communities. The second line is the population in the community. And the third line I got highlighted at the top of the page is the cesium only, not the uranium, plutonium, and the biggest byproduct is the curium and the rest of the isotopes, but cesium-137, which, because they do that, these nuclear should be banned worldwide because they refuse to acknowledge the brutal attributes nuclear have. So, average disposition per square meter in the community. In Koriyama City, it's 162,000 counts per minute of just gamma, where you stood up to and swing your arms around. So if you add in curium isotopes, uranium isotopes, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and all their daughters, and all the other fission products, the numbers are stunning. It's so heartless to do something like that. And then to make the children go to school in a nuclear wasteland, and then the only solution they can come up with, because the nuclear industry won't help them, is to put up bottles of water to shield them from the outdoors radiation. Because the shine will shine right through the buildings, right? Just the radioactive fallout emissions. But you can't keep it out of the buildings. Because they have furnaces, that sucks in all kinds of air. They have windows, etc., etc. The doors are opening and closing constantly for years. I mean, that is horrifying that they're abandoned like that. Nuclear waste canisters must last an entire century, is a new bill proposed. Nuclear industry will beat that down, right? The nuclear industry won't let anything good happen. They'll stop that. They don't know how to be human, see? And everybody that's working here, you see the vents on the top of the canisters? And everybody working there is getting shine, gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays. Will my teenager be dead for the nuclear waste is removed from the bluffs at San Onofre? Representative Mike Levin has introduced again the 100-year Canister Life Act. Well, the canister won't last 100 years because of the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the gamma shines, the X-rays will denigrate the material no matter what you use, even if you use tungsten. It would do exactly as it said required a Nuclear Regulatory Commission to license only storage systems that can safely contain nuclear waste from an entire century. But it doesn't work that way. You can't do it. That would more than double, otherwise they would have already done it, see? That would more than double the required lifespan of temporary storage systems like the ones at San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, and which we know won't last 50 years, and more than 70 nuclear plants like it across the nation. Right now, these waste storage systems must last 40 years. And of course, they won't last 40 years. Who's going to be around to check on it? I bet you I won't be. My apologies. Hang on. I don't even turn the volume down 50% of the time. I keep forgetting about it. Well, I remember when I'm glunk, 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 glunk. Which is too late, obviously, right? I got to remember to move back because you can hear every little breath I take. It's shocking. Let me step back a little, couple of inches, try to chest out, stomach in, back straight, chin up. Here we go. More than 3.5 million pounds of nuclear waste is stored at San Onofre near active faults. Some 10 million people and the camp Pendleton Marine Base. I'm going to turn my volume down just a notch, one notch. Because my audio system has gotten quite good over the years. And so my microphone is 800, for instance. My equalizer and my Pro MPA2 was $900. Then I have a cloud. I don't know if I can hold it up high enough so you can see it, the cloud. It's not very big, is it? I'm going to screw up my audio. Watch this. Be struggling for the next 10 minutes trying to fix my audio. So I got a little cloud system there. They're $270. So it doesn't take long. Like if you want the real equipment, you want to do a good job, that's how you're gonna. That's the only way you can do it. You got to spend that money. We tried all the shortcuts, and they don't work. And this one is so sensitive. If you lean in, everybody's getting too many details. Nationwide, the problem is magnified by nearly 100-fold. Commercial reactors have generated 19,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel to date. And those still operating could generate another 50,000 metric tons. That's 309 million pounds of unbelievable lethal fuel. If you take a pound of it and put it at a subway, in a wall at a subway, everybody walks past it will die that day for 1,000,000 years. But in the context of nuclear waste, a lot of people only consider the nuclear fuel to be a high-level waste. But the sludge left over from the production, like at Hanford, where they have 177 tanks. And they dumped 1.4 million tanks of these 300,000 gallon tanks directly into the soil, which is 450 billion gallons. And a liter of that stuff is equal to a liter of this pound of that fuel rods. It's splitting atoms, right? They dump that directly into the soil, and that's equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. So imagine a wall of nuclear waste wrapped around the entire planet, 518 feet tall. And that's just one single site. And just one incident. They've had many more incidences like that we don't know about. And Mayak in the former Soviet Union, now Russia, has done at least the same. China definitely done the same. India, Pakistan, Israel, many countries. And Canada is despicable what Canada is doing. And about 1/4 of those sites no longer have operating reactors. Oh, we got Stephen, Las Vegas. Oh, there's a pleasant surprise. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, Dana.
Hi, Stephen. How are you, sir? I know you're not doing very good. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I actually got some good news today. I went and saw a new neurologist.
Yep.
And she said I don't have Guillain-Barré syndrome. If I'd have had that I would have got better in like the longest 6 months.
Wow.
Says I have what they call CIPD, which is also a nerve disorder, but they might be able to actually do something about it. They're going to start giving me like intravenous treatments in like the next couple of weeks.
Wow, that is great news. That's fantastic. Holy smokes.
I'm not holding my breath.
Well, it's, at least it's something. I want you to watch the documentary called The Universal Antidote, the THE, Universal Antidote.
I've tried about everything. I take every supplement that there is.
Yeah, but you haven't tried this one.
I'm trying to do
You haven't tried.
physical therapy and massage therapy and acupuncture and.
Yeah, you have so. Yeah, no kidding.
So I'm hoping that maybe this will work,
Yeah, well, I mean,
and maybe I'll be able to get out of this wheelchair and walk again.
yeah, well, I mean, my goodness. You know, like they're
But
at least you got some news.
Know the good news, so.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody is thrilled to hear that, actually. And so that was today?
What's that?
When did you see that doctor? Was that today? I'm sorry.
I went and saw it today, yeah.
Yeah.
A new neurologist.
And they're going to try a different regimen.
I actually was not, hopeful of it like anything, and
Yeah, I hear
I
you.
walked out there with some new hope. So
No.
maybe this will probably be the answer, something that will help.
Yeah, well, again, you want to watch that documentary, The Universal Antidote. Because
I'll watch that.
it's basically I can't put it up on YouTube, and so but I want you to watch it, and you can order it on Amazon, and it's got some incredible benefits, unbelievable benefits. But I just want to make sure I mentioned to you why I had you on the phone, Stephen. That was all. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled.
Not everything, and hopefully maybe this will be the answer.
Yeah, well, that's hope, right? Like he's telling you, it's not what you thought it was, and they have a regiment they can put you on that's going to make.
It started out as Guillain-Barré syndrome, but she said if that was all you had, you would have got better within 6 months.
Well, I didn't know that.
She said now it's developed into what they call CIPD, which is basically another nerve disorder. But
Stephen Young, for folks that are not familiar, that didn't catch it when we started the phone call. We got Stephen, and everybody knows Stephen from the comments section, I'm sure. Yeah, that's great, Stephen. Okay. I'm really interested in how that's going to play out.
Everybody know the good news.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure everybody's happy.
After 3 years, I'll finally get out of this wheelchair.
Well, at least you got the spirit. At least you still got the spirit, and you really do, right?
Well, she tested my strength, and she goes, "That's all good."
So she's.
And I know, like, I work hard every day to keep my strength up.
Yeah.
He said, my problem is I don't have any feeling in my feet and my hands, because this attacked me from my knees down to my feet and from my elbows down to my hands.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. I remember the first year, it was unbelievably hard for you to type in a word on it was unbelievable difficult.
It's gotten better from that, but, like just signing my name, like, it wasn't even legible. Now I can write it where it's legible, but it's still not like I used to write.
Is that right? Wow. So it's still pretty darn bad, yeah.
So yeah. I'm hoping this will be the answer.
I'm excited. That you made my day. Tell me this, Stephen. Make no mistake about it. You made my day by hearing that. That's great news for me, anyway.
Made my day, believe me.
Yeah.
I said actually a doctor with some answers.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
Well, yeah, you're going to have to keep us updated.
I love you.
Love you too, buddy. Make sure you keep us updated, Stephen. We're definitely interested, okay?
I will.
Okay, my friend. Loves you. Hugs for the wife. Take care now.
Like I said, next Tuesday I'm supposed to call and see when I get my first injection.
Okay.
So we'll see.
I'm loving the idea right now. That's fantastic news, Stephen. Okay, my friend.
Okay.
Love you. Take care now.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. That's Stephen Young. Stephen, after all this time, 3 years of just unbelievable misery, has got a little bit of hope for a change, right? Most people don't get that given to them. And I know where he's coming from. It took me 10 years to get out of a hospital bed after a diving accident. So I know what it's like to struggle for a very long period of time, right? When the world gave up on you, and I remember the world gave up on me. And I remember there was a lot of, I was abused by the system significantly. And all I wanted to do was just free myself enough to get clear to get the system out of my house 24 hours a day, right? That was my big dream. I didn't have a bigger dream than that. My dream was to be able to do my own dishes, cook my own food, be able to use a wheelchair and stuff like that. And when I finally got them out of my house, I said, I'll never let these people back my house. Some were really nice, but a lot of them were terrible people. And so that's great news. Stephen Young has got a new path forward, and it's going to start a new regiment and injections that might change his life quite quickly, because when you're misdiagnosed, what happens? You're getting the wrong treatments. But if you're correctly diagnosed and there is treatments available, it can dramatically change life. It might not get you back to 100%, but it gets your life back, right? Get up and get your own showers and get up and get your own cup of tea. It seems pretty benign, but when you can't do it on your own, it's pretty devastating. So that was fantastic news. So let's go to the next story because this is a dirt road in the San Onofre gave out. So this whole infrastructure is pretty rough, and they're on a fault line where they have in San Onofre nuclear power plant, right, which is closed, but they have an enormous amount of canisters of nuclear fuel stored right on the shoreline. Okay, Fukushima operator accused of cover-up over contaminated water set to be poured into the Pacific. And so the tanks at Fukushima, the Japanese government has been accused of a cover-up after it refused to allow independent testing of the water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. Somebody had texted me with it. I'm wrong. I'm excited over Stephen's news. So let me go back to this one again because I just glazed over. Fukushima won't let anybody independently test the tanks because the tanks are empty, right? And we know the tanks are empty because the buildings all blew up in the first 6 days. There's nothing left. The official story is these buildings didn't blow up. So the official story, and the International Atomic Energy Agency certified this story, that the building you're looking at didn't blow up. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Does the building look like they blew up to anybody besides me? Of course they do. Europe backs nuclear power expansion with Provisional Net Zero Industry Act. And the Net Zero was a paper written by Miles Allen. Let me see if I can find that paper. I know I can find it, but do I want to spend a lot of time looking for it is the question. It should be right in the big pile. I just scroll down, wait for it to populate. I'll tell you what, I'm going to find it anyway. Here it is. Here she bleeds. So there's a bunch of papers written that United Nations weaponize. Let me come back to this one. So Miles Allen was the physicist behind net zero. He's got a cushy job at Cambridge in the UK right now. So let's tell that story of the 4 studies that destroyed everybody's freedoms. So Brock Wallace, or Wallace Brocker rather, my apologies, is the father of global warming, the hockey stick man. Or is that James Hansen? I can't remember. So that study started the downhill spiral where United Nations grabbed the study and weaponized it against humanity. They also grabbed Miles Allen's study on net zero and weaponized that against humanity. BP Oil had a major oil spill, and they came out with a public campaign about the carbon footprint. And the idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005. The campaign was intended to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry onto the individual consumers. And then you had the degenerates of degenerates from NASA. And I hate NASA because of James Hansen. There's other reasons, trust me. But James Hansen, I hate him so much, what he done. He done a single congressional testimony that was completely a lie. He's best known for his research in climatology and his 1988 congressional testimony on climate change that helped raise broad awareness of global warming. climate change. His testimony was an important turning point in the history of global climate change, and his testimony was pivotal and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debates. So you had Wallace Brocker, the father of global warming. You had Miles Allen, the father of climate change. You had BP Oil, the father... Oh, shit. We're way down to the bottom. Hang on. I'm going to come all the way back and find that spot. Sometimes if I double click and I shift, that'll get yanked out from underneath me. So let me do it again. You had Brock Wallace, right, was the father of global warming. Wallace Brocker, done it again. You had Miles Allen, the father of net zero. You had BP Oil, carbon footprint, and you had degenerate James Hansen. So those four situations is three scumbag academics and BP Oil, which was a public relation campaign, a very expensive one, tens and tens of millions of dollars. United Nations, which is a military-industrial complex with 195 countries participating in it, and has no sovereignty over any country worldwide, took those four studies, which are all fabricated, and then weaponized it against humanity, and have used it to bludgeon any dissenting voices or opinions since. So when Europe talks about Net Zero Industry Act, that's based on Miles Allen's paper. So whenever you hear net zero, that's based on a single, not a whole bunch of people, and it's not even a peer-reviewed paper. So whenever you hear net zero, say Miles Allen's a piece of shit for Dana. Europe backs nuclear power expansion with Provisional Net Zero Industry Act. And why do they always show us, especially Europeans, whenever they show a nuclear plant, they'll show all the farmers' fields surrounding these disease factories? So net zero, net zero, net zero. They're not trying to brainwash you at all, are they? Including small modular reactors and advanced nuclear reactors, which don't exist. So how can the European Union, Europe, back something that doesn't exist? Ottawa company to test Davis Bessie's emergency sirens on Friday. Nuclear power can by no means be without a carbon footprint. Apart from the obvious issue to where to store the burnt radioactive fuel, which is only 2% burnt, the rest of it is still splitting atoms. The whole production chain of nuclear energy emits massive so-called greenhouse gases. Well, nuclear is climate change, right? The emissions are catastrophic to the environment. They're pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, and they'll be there long past the human experience. Nuclear energy is a dangerous pseudo-solution to the climate crisis. EU turn. Brussels finally recognized nuclear power as strategic for green goals. And again, they show you farmers' fields surrounding nuclear disease factories. Slowly but surely, the European Union is accepting the fact that the renewables are not enough and will need nuclear energy in its fight to reduce the fossil fuel dependence. It doesn't need nuclear, it needs geothermal. And Europe's an unbelievable, perfect spot for geothermal. Because the reality of it is, no matter where you're to, you can drill deep enough. And the technology, as of 2024, now exists to quantify that assertion. And so what they're going to tell you is, there's only certain areas where geothermal is applicable. That's a downright outrageous cover story to prop up the nuclear industry. Just after the European Commission unveiled its new climate targets on Tuesday, February the 6th, it also announced it was launching an industry alliance to develop small modular reactors. Again, they don't exist. They won't be ready for commercial viability or production for at least a couple of decades. You got to build experimental ones, and they can't be built as a generating station for communities. You got to build it, you got to run it, you got to get the kinks out of it. First, you got to get it through the licensing stage. That's 5 or 6 years. Then they're going to send it back to you with all kinds of modification requests. You got to re-engineer everything to include the modifications. Then you resubmit it to the regulatory agency. They put 300 or 400 or 500 people to go through the million pieces of paper. And 2 or 3 years later, if they approve it, then you got to get it. Now you can raise funding for the land. And now you get your land. It's going to take $500 million just to engineer the land for nuclear. So once you do that, now you got to find people that can actually build something that never existed before. And just like NuScale, instead of coming in at $5 billion, it was coming in at well over $20 billion. In other words, and it was only going to be half the power of a single nuclear plant. It's the word scam. All it's doing is stopping us from coming up with solutions. They have set us back 1,000 years already. Well, the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union came to an agreement. No, they didn't. You can't label nuclear power as a strategic technology. Because the time you implement it, all the other storage and renewable energy sources are going to be dirt cheap, right? You know, these memorandums of understandings, because that's basically what you're looking at, where you're committing to an industry that doesn't even exist. And allow subsidies to speed up the nuclear development. You can give the nuclear industry all the money in the world, as we see over and over and over. Look no further than the UK or in America, or NuScale or anything else. And what do you see? You see it never comes to fruition, does it? 90% of the money goes to administration, right? The newly unveiled 24, because they're so used to just having money thrown at them, the thievery that goes on, the kickbacks and everything else, you can't build a nuclear power plant without bankrupting your cities and communities. The newly unveiled 2040 climate target pursues a perhaps overtly ambitious CO2 reductions. Well, like, you can't reduce CO2, you're only at 0.04% in the atmosphere. If you get down to 0.02, plants can't even grow. Like, the reason we got climate change is real simple. If you're honest, then the truth is incontestable, right? This is a radioactive failure from Fukushima, but this is just the Pacific Ocean based on, I'll tell you when it stops here now. Let me move it forward. So this is April the 1st right here. It's still hemorrhaging out, right? That's Hawaii right there. So you got, now this covers the whole planet on most of the models in about 20 to 30 days. Well, in 30 days, all the models. This is only cesium-137 model. And so you got a plume that never goes away, that pulses energy. It's like a snowstorm, but you can't see it. If it was a snowstorm, then you would get it, right? Because it's exactly like a snowstorm, except it's much thicker than a snowstorm. It would be like a blizzard if you could actually see it. And every single one of these particles or atoms, are pulsing energy and an explosion every second for millions of years. Because the models of the cesium means it's the exact same models are for curium. In fact, there's more curium than there is cesium. Curium isotopes are the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. So the model is also going to be the exact same for plutonium, the exact same for the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, it's the same for the iodine-129, the same for every single isotope. You're going to get the exact same model. And this has been going on for 80 years. These releases from the fuel pools will look exactly like too. This model is based upon venting. It's not even based on the nuclear meltdowns. Back from that mic. And what that means is every day you got another snowstorm coming from 414 nuclear reactors, fuel pools worldwide. Not counting all the experimental reactors, all the university reactors, all the laboratory, the national laboratory reactors. Not counting all the venting each reactor does, not counting the incinerators from every single nuclear power plant has its own incinerators. Not counting the legacy, not counting all the dumping, all the emissions from history, all the accidents, all the nuclear weapons. So you got this endless plume in your ecosystem that is like a snowstorm, but instead of snow, it's a hot particle that's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, 10, 20, 30 feet with each pulse. And that's pure energy, almost at the speed of light. And it does it every second on its own, and it never goes away. And so it's because you can't perceive it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or perceive it, doesn't mean that this is not a huge issue. So gas, oil, and coal emissions, which is carbon, don't make plumes like this. You'll never see a carbon plume that does this. Carbon is your friend. You can't have trees, can't have plants or insects or birds or mammals or animals or humans or any species on the planet without carbon. And trying to reduce carbon, let me play that clip for you, actually. This was a testimony like James Hansen and the rest of them in Senate, and he asked a real simple question. I'll play the clip for you. I'll get it out of the way. I'm going to have to adjust the volume in real time. He's going to ask him how much carbon is in the atmosphere, and at the very end of it, it's a very short video, he's going to tell you.
Panelists, what percent of our atmosphere is CO2?
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide?
I'll bite 5%.
5?
We'll go 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5. Do you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7, 8. I'm going to hit the high end.
All right. The answer is 0.04%. Not 1%, not half of a percent. It's 0.04%. It's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple of decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing, is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying.
So if you get below 0.02%, if you get below 0.02%, plant life starts dying off. And the amount we're talking about is gone up from 0.03% to 0.04%. Not 4%, not 5%, not 7%, not 8%. Right? It's not 5, and he says it's actually 0.4%. And if you get below 0.04%, if you go down 2/100ths of another 2/100%, it's so tiny that we all should be humiliated. It seems, however, the European Union also realized the inefficiency renewables would not be enough on their own to help them reach net zero. Just hang on, we'll counter that real quick. Last year was 507 gigawatts of renewables came online versus no nuclear was replaced. In other words, nuclear went back 2 gigawatts, 1.7 gigawatts. But the total nuclear is 365 gigawatts worldwide after 80 years. And in just 12 months, renewables was 507 gigawatts, which is equal to 600 nuclear power plants. Let me see if I can bring that up real quick. Yeah, there it is. There we go. So global nuclear power faces unprecedented challenges. There's 407 reactors with a total capacity of 365 gigawatts. And in 2023, renewable capacities are set to jump by 107 gigawatts, which is 507 gigawatts total, to 440 gigawatts in 2000. And that we got the new update. I can't remember where it's to off the top of my head. Is now 507 gigawatts. It's 507 gigawatts. Well, that should be enough folder. Just bear with me. Don't you just hate it when it's not where it's supposed to be? Let me see if I'm smart enough to find it. Won't take me long. We got all these folders, right? That from each show. I'm surprised I didn't click it by now. Gonna make me work for it. Hang on. Yeah, that's it there. All right, let me just transfer that to somewhere where I can find it. And then I'll bring it up for you. There we go. I can put it somewhere else after. Okay, so, oh, don't click that, Dana. Boom, baby. So this was the new one, came out in 2024. Nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacity in 2023, and renewable capacity additions amounted to a record 507 gigawatts in 2023. So with the European Union coming out making the assertions that nuclear is somehow strategic and can't meet and can't compete, it's a despicable law, and they know it. Nuclear Waste Management Organization secured 1,500 acres of prime farmland in Ontario, Canada for their nuclear waste, and they want people to keep farming the field. Think about an industry, because everything that goes into the nuclear waste deep geological repositories gets repackaged at the surface, and everything in the transportation is vented into all the communities and the highways. And a lot of these highways are full of farms on both sides of the roads. It's a parasitic, genocidal, omnicidal industry. Nuclear goes backwards again as wind and solar enjoy another year of record growth. We already done that one. 507 gigawatts, 50% higher than 2022. So between 2022 and 2023, well, let's go look at 2021 was 300 gigawatts of renewables. 2022 was 360 gigawatts, that's 660. And 2023 was 507, so that's 1,137 gigawatts. 1,137 gigawatts in 3 years, which is triple the entire capacity of nuclear in 80 years. Renewables done in 3 years. It's completely dishonest to suggest that renewables can't hold their own. Because renewables don't all come from the one spot, right? They're all over the place. So it might not be windy here today, but it's windy right there and it's windy right there today. You know what I mean? It's windy 50 miles away. It's windy by the coastline. It's always windy on the mountains, so why don't you put your windmills up in the mountains or in the valleys where the winds are always strong? Japan earthquake in January first shifted the coastline in the Noto Peninsula for 85 kilometers, 800 feet. So think of a football field. So now think of two of them. It's actually a lot longer than 2 football fields. The coastline rose up 13 feet. The Noto Peninsula earthquake. And I was really upset with a story where they claimed that there's 170,000 military was out there helping everybody. And we covered it for the entire time, right? We covered that for the entire time. So when you look at this, look at the coastline just rose up. So the harbors are no longer functional where the wharfs were. The wharfs are all dried out now. The boats where the boats were anchored, the boats are now dried out. And if that happened in a milliseconds, if it didn't happen, the tsunami would have torn up those communities. The intense uplift extended the coastline by up to 820 feet, 250 meters, which is greater than the length of 2 American football fields. Report, new TEPCO data unequivocally shows an ongoing nuclear criticality at the Unit 2 reactor. Because right now they're allegedly going into the Unit 2 reactor to get fuel out with robots and drones. It's just pure nonsense. Unit 2 completely liquefied, 100% liquefaction of a uranium core, and we've never seen this before in the history of nuclear power. Which means it burnt its way straight down into the earth, where you got geysers coming out of the ground at lethal doses. And I'll show you that coming up, actually. Western Tokyo may have been contaminated when the radioactive plume fell to the ground after number 2 reactor core was exposed to Japan Professor. Western Tokyo may have been contaminated when the radioactive plume fell to the ground after number 2 reactor core. Reactor 2 was the only building. Sorry about that. Reactor 2 is the only building that looks like it's intact, but it burnt constantly for days. Facing 2.4 million tons of wreckage. Well, if you put a ton in the back of a 1-ton pickup truck, that's 9,700 miles. So that's right across America, 2 rows of traffic across America, from one end of the country to the other end of the country. Or 2 rows of traffic across Canada from one end of the country to the other end of the country of debris. So that was a significant earthquake, is all I'm trying to say, right? Looking at the ocean of debris covering the areas, disaster victims simply have no idea how it will all get cleared away. Because Suzo, which for the first couple of days, they said there was 4,500 homes collapsed. Complete destroyed. And then on day 3, they stopped reporting on Suzu and never mentioned it after. And even today, we have just very grainy. The only footage we got out there was grainy footage. And a day when nobody has a grainy cell phone camera. Nobody's camera takes a shitty picture anymore, right? An estimated 2.44 million tons of wreckage. So you're definitely talking about at least 40,000 homes were completely destroyed just on the Noto Peninsula, the Ishikawa Prefecture. Self-Defense Force, Japan Coast Guard drill for relief items delivered to isolated areas from the sea. So this was a weird story. Now they're doing drills how to bring relief items to isolated areas from the sea. Because we covered a story a couple of days ago where they claimed they used the big hovercrafts to come right up on the beach and deliver equipment. And we've covered that Noto Peninsula earthquake non-stop for 30 days. And we have strong evidence to suggest that the number 1 fuel pool, reactor core fuel pool, or number 1 building fuel pool melted down at the Shika nuclear power plant. And we still got no footage from Shika. And Shika was hit by a 7 out of a 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. In other words, Shika nuclear community was hit with the biggest earthquake Japan can have, theoretically. And they said in the basement, it was an upper 5, which is a 6, on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. And 7 is the biggest earthquake Japan can have. And in the basement of the number 1 reactor, not the number 2 reactor, but the number 1 reactor. So why are we getting those types of connotations? And because we cover so much material, sometimes I don't cover it during the show. That don't mean during the day that I'm not thinking about it or looking for it. Fukushima worker, they're wearing tungsten vest when outside of reactor 3. That's reactor 3. So reactor 3 is completely destroyed and everybody knew it right away. Every academic on the planet knew the fuel pools were gone. So look at the tungsten vest they're wearing. You know who's wearing that? It ain't nuclear academics or nuclear scientists. That's the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. It means they would have died that day or that week. Small modular reactors do not solve the many problems of nuclear, period. As the European Commission prepares to launch its industry alliance for small modular reactors on the 6th of February, 2 days ago, civil society organizations stressed the high costs, the slow progress, making this technology a risky distraction for the climate. Again, there's nothing wrong with the climate outside of 80 years of nuclear emissions. It ain't carbon. It is the desperate fight, in its desperate fight for survival, the European nuclear industry is pleading for public support for small modular reactors. It's pleading for something that don't exist. Instead of geothermal, which exists, for instance, and doesn't need any storage and is completely, can be built in 1 year. Instead of something that might not show up for 20 or 30 years, why are you putting memorandums of understanding on a technology that doesn't even exist, let it come to fruition? But smaller scale nuclear won't change the poor economics of the investments in atomic energy. No, because new scale was going to cost around 20 billion plus, if they ever finished it, and you would have had 460 megawatts. And for 20 billion, you can build at least 2,000 megawatts of despicable nuclear. We don't even know how long it would take to build the small modular reactors, as all previous attempts have been scrapped. It's a 100% Ponzi scheme, right? Why should the EU invest in costly alternatives over existing climate solutions? Every euro wasted on disgusting nuclear could help replace fossil fuel faster and cheaper if it invested in renewables, grids, and energy storage instead. And what it was is they had made up the shortage of fossil fuels. What they want, they need the fossil fuel for the military, right? All the militaries are your biggest users of fossil fuel. And so they look far into the future. They want to have enough fossil fuel for the future, for their militaries. And if they had to come out and said, look, you know, we want to develop technology, we're going to replace everything. But instead of just demonizing fossil fuel, which was a really stupid way to go about it. It was like a panic moment one day where they panicked and then the media ran with it and they were stuck with that narrative for the rest of their lives. They're not stupid, they're just scumbags. Could help replace fossil fuel faster and cheaper, invested in renewable grids and energy storage. And there's so many storage, like there's water batteries where you build 2 reservoirs and you pump water up to the top one with excess energy. And then there's compressed air storage where you dig mine shafts, which are stupidly simple and quick and easy, and you just compress air down there. And you're talking about grid scale. You're talking about you can power huge cities, multi-million people, off these kinds of techniques. And so there's many other solutions besides that. There's volcanic rocks, and there's endless supplies of them. And they can hold heat up to 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures for extended periods. So you can store it. There's all kinds of ways. You can also heat sand and store it up to 700 degrees in sand and be able to utilize it 2 weeks later. Despite the hype, small modular reactors do not currently answer any of the industry's fundamental problems. They're too expensive. In relative terms, the construction costs for small modular reactors are higher than that for large nuclear power plants due to their low electricity output. Unproven technologies. Even the simplest design used today in submarines will not be available at scale until late next decade, if at all. And taking into account the learning curve of the nuclear industry, an average of 3,000 small modular reactors would have to be constructed in order to be financially viable. We've heard this argument before. This is a true argument. So imagine this industry that can't even complete a single reactor without going multiple times over budget and decades late. It's an industry of scumbags. Like, I can't sugarcoat it because that's what it is an industry of scumbags. The entire legacy, when you start looking at nuclear, it's like we cover nuclear stories, we cover lies. And I typically do a 2-hour show 5 days a week. You can't cover all the lies each day in a 24-hour news cycle. You can't keep up with it. Every single story is going to be full of propaganda and lies. It's unbelievable. You're talking about just over the last decade, 100,000 journalists who come out and stabbed everybody in the back. Well, they didn't write the articles. The nuclear industry wrote the articles. The journalist published it and gets a kickback, right? The journalist builds up an audience of cat videos and everything else. Nuclear industry says, well, they got a bit of an audience over there. Let's throw $1,000 at this journalist. And the journalist's like, this is great. All I'll do is put my name on it, publish it, and I get $1,000 at PayPal. That's how it works for the nuclear industry, right? Nuclear power is one of the two least effective mitigation options alongside of carbon capture and storage. Like, why would you carbon capture? If you start capturing the carbon, then plants won't grow. Humans can't be alive. Insects won't exist. You can't have carbon. You can't have a planet without carbon. It's called the moon. Current small modular reactor designs would create 20 to 30 times more radioactive waste, high-level waste. See, like when we think of high-level waste, we think of fuel rods. And these are lethal doses just trying to run past them. But intermediate level waste is unbelievably lethal. And there's unbelievable amount of it released into the environment, dumped, and they have no way of containing it. So the numbers were worked out was there's 30 times more low-level waste, 35 times more intermediate-level waste, and at least 5 times more high-level waste when you use small modular reactors, because you're going to be using the plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is an abomination on humanity and the 8 million species. These are brutal emitters. And when you take it out of the reactor, you're going to have to put it somewhere, which is a fuel pool. And they don't know what to do with this stuff when it comes out of the reactor. It's so lethal. It's splitting atoms. It's boiling off water like insane. And each liter is going to be saturated with these vicious, deadly, disease factory isotopes. New nuclear ventures take time and resources, and we simply don't have to tackle the climate crisis. Well, the climate crisis caused... The tipping stone was Fukushima. That was a pulse event on our planet. And that was the catalyst. If you go look in post-Fukushima, pre-Fukushima, and post-Fukushima, you'll see the climate woes escalate 1,000-fold post-Fukushima. New nuclear ventures take time and resources. We simply don't have to tackle the climate crisis. Diverting attention from energy efficiency and faster deploy renewables costs experimental technologies, risk pushing Europe further away from meeting its climate commitment under the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was a scam to promote nuclear. Simple as that. And so I don't think we got to the poll tonight, did we? I apologize, everybody. Caught up in Dana's world. Is the non-existent fusion and the non-existent small modular reactors one of the most idiotic solution to energy besides nuclear? It looks like we got a roaring yes on that one. Bless your hearts. TEPCO paid for the creation of a blacklist of actors and musicians who are against the nuclear industry. So, have you ever seen a headline where it says, blah, blah, blah company paid for the creation of a blacklist of actors and musicians who are against gas or oil or coal or solar or wind? No. Nuclear is a hateful industry. It's the people in it are just hateful scum. And that's what it attracts, right? It's nuclear renaissance. More and more countries turn to nuclear power. Again, that's simply not true. Right? That's an unbelievable misrepresentation of the facts. In 2023, I don't know if I mentioned it, but in 2023, so this is January 21st, 2024, nuclear goes backwards. Nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacities in 2023, whereas renewable capacity additions amounted to a record 507 gigawatts, which is equal to around 600 large nuclear power plants. So for the media to come out and says they're a nuclear renaissance, it's completely dishonest and disingenuous. Nuclear power for shipping takes a step forward with the help of the world's largest shipyard. Like a step forward to them is somebody mentioned it. Like there's zero possibility it's going to happen. It's zero possibility. They don't have small modular reactors. They have companies that are trying to make a profit off gullible companies, and this is a write-off for large companies to look at it. And then the companies exist because they know they can make money because these large shipping companies want to write off some extra money, which the taxpayers has to kick back to them right away. It's a 100% Ponzi scheme. It doesn't take a step forward. It can't take a step forward. It's disgusting nuclear. So think about Fukushima for a second. Fukushima reactor site engulfed by steam, at least something that looks like steam, coming from an unknown source at number 3 reactor. It wasn't coming from number 3, it was coming from under the ground, continuously wafting through the air, and worked to remove the rubble. Like calling rubble at a nuclear meltdown, anybody does that, I got words for them I'm not going to use here tonight. TEPCO, despicable, disgusting TEPCO, confirmed the steam came up from underground at reactor number 1 at 4.7 sieverts per hour from the ground, which is 20% more than it was in June. 4.7 sieverts is a lethal dose. So if you walk through that steam, that's a lethal dose, which means you have to abandon the site. But here's another story, and this video is the steam. Look at this steam. If you're in that steam, you died. This is 40 times their speed, which is 8 times the normal speed. Near the reactors, there's a lot of cracks in the ground. The steam is coming up from there. Sometimes we have to detect at 10 sieverts per hour at 6 places. So the steam is not splashing out of the ground. You can see it. It's airborne everywhere. And this is TEPCO's video, by the way, showing the steam. That video was... Workers say the ground under the Fukushima plant is cracking and radioactive steam is coming up, and that the melted core may be moving out of the buildings. Well, if steam is coming out of the ground, the melted cores are China syndrome. And up in the sky, if you look up there in the top corner, you can see, well, it looks like a light, right? But that reminds me that there's so much radiation coming up that up in the sky you're having these events with all the gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas smashing into each other at the speed of light, and it actually causes like these little fires and little flashes. We have detected 10 sieverts. These are lethal doses. And the Geiger counters, by the way, maxed out at 10 sieverts per hour. Like the thought of a nuclear scientist going here, they would actually kill you if you try to drag them in there. If you grabbed them and try to pull them into this area, they will kill you. They'll pick up a rock and smash you in the face with it. They'll claw your eyes, or they'll be screaming like a child, "No, I don't want to get my hair cut." Radioactive waste besides Ottawa River will remain hazardous for thousands of years. Citizen group. Yeah, because the media is not going to tell you the truth, so the group has to tell you the truth. So this is straight downhill with 1 million tons. It'll be straight, this is a rendition of it, straight downhill to the Ottawa River, basically. Deep River, Ontario, 1 kilometer from the Ottawa River. This is a surface disposal from Chalk River, which had 2 nuclear meltdowns already, which is a national laboratory run by Jacobs and Flora, which are not even Canadian, by the way. Disposal project, a 7-story radioactive mount known as the Near Surface Disposal Facility, aka a bunch of nuclear waste dumped in the ground with a cover on top of it. Calling it a Near Surface Disposal Facility is ridiculous. So you're going to call some rocks and grass and dirt a facility, are you? You horrible scumbag. The nuclear industry is just horrible. Disposal project is 7-story radioactive mountain known as the Near, 7 stories high. And everything runs downhill into the Ottawa River. Anything to do with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is a dud. They're out to murder as many Canadians as they can and as many species as they can. And there's a native group up there, there's indigenous native communities up there. Thank goodness they exist, because I'm silent, I'm all but silent, right? If they found me and got educated, that would be the end of Chalk River pretty quick, I would imagine. The group sent a letter Sunday to the federal government asking to stop all funding for the project and look for alternative ways to dump the stupid waste underground. Like, you know, up in Bruce County in Inglis, they bought 1,800 acres of farmland. That's how evil these people actually are, the nuclear industry, for the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. But what they're doing at Chalk River National Laboratories in Ontario, Canada, is separate. This is Cold War weapons material that they want to put in the surface waste. And they said, no, we're just going to put radioactive gloves and radioactive tools there, Dana. You got 1 million fucking tons of that, do you? You piece of shit, lying scum. Sorry. It happens with Dana sometimes. Forgot to turn the volume down again. I don't even know why I bother thinking that I can't remember to do it. The reason it doesn't happen is because I'm afraid I don't turn it back on. I'm afraid. And the next thing you know, everybody's in the comment section. Dan, I can't hear you. And I'm like, I don't have the comment section up right now, so I'm talking for another 2 minutes. The group warned the waste destined for the mount is heavily contaminated with very long-lived radioactive materials that puts the public at risk of developing cancers, birth defects, and genetic mutations, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. Top nuclear scientist David Suzuki, Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. He said, I've seen a paper which says it's bye-bye Japan and evacuate the North American West Coast if the Unit 4 goes after a quake and the rods are exposed. So if a nuclear plant, so in other words, if that happens, you should have abandoned basically North America, Canada, and the United States. If that happens. So then they cooked up this picture and said it looks like that, it doesn't look like this. But let's play the video because that's kind of fun.
Three out of the four plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The fourth one has been so badly damaged that the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the fourth plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate. Now, if that isn't terrifying, I don't know what. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine.
So if that's not terrifying, what actually is? Well, it did melt down. It is gone. So that's what it is. And we should have abandoned, even today, at least the west coast of British Columbia, because I've done the research expeditions up there. And you can find that in last night's video in the very first part of it. Yeah, I don't know, maybe like 20 minutes in, half an hour in, but if you scan through it, you'll start seeing the before and after pictures and the boats and that. Just go watch that and it'll get you up to speed if you're not familiar. The Ford government's decision, or you can go to my playlist and find the horrifying actual full stories. The Ford government's decision on nuclear will set Ontario back 30 years. Yeah, what Ford, that's not Ford Deere, by the way. That's the energy minister, isn't it? So first off, what Ford done, what Ford done in Ontario last year was he closed 750 large wind and solar farms because they're competing with nuclear, right? 750, and that each of them had $6 million allocated to them, $4.5 billion total, for storage. And so they took the $4.5 billion, gave it to Bruce Nuclear Power for storage, and closed the 750 wind and solar farms. Doug Ford is shifting into reverse, setting the province back 30 years or more, both environmentally and economically, which is 100% true. It's certainly more than that. That the planned rebuilding of the Pickering nuclear generation station is being marketed to Ontario voters as they step forward on either climate change, again, which is a ludicrous assertion, or the province's bottom line is as clear as an indicator as ever that the government doesn't much respect our intelligence. It's very unusual to get any blowback from the nuclear industry in Canada, so I'm thrilled. Nuclear power is the most expensive energy money can buy, and 1 kilowatt an hour of new nuclear costs 5 to 13 times more than a kilowatt hour of solar and wind. That's a stunning one, isn't it? Energy Minister Todd Smith, and that's who was in that picture, I believe, was Todd Smith right there at the podium. Announcements last Tuesday were full of fuzzy math and fuzzy thinking. Oh yeah, this story is great. To begin with, calling this a refurbishment project is misleading. Pickering Nuclear Power Plant isn't just the oldest nuclear power plant in Canada, it's one of the oldest in the entire world. And while refurbishment implies a superficial improvement or aesthetic enhancement, Pickering is going to require something much more involved. That isn't a new coat of paint, it's a reconstruction whose cost is likely to be in the tens of billions. Because the original story is $2 billion, right? When you start reading through it, that's just the preamble to get it ready to see if it'll qualify to be funded for $10 billion or more. And we know it won't be just $10 billion. Smith also uses the term intermittent when describing renewables, and it's a common misconception that nuclear power plants can run all the time, whereas solar and wind plants offer only intermittent power because of cloudy days or a lack of wind. This ignores the fact that nuclear reactors frequently have to be shut down for things like maintenance, safety inspections, refueling, and the solar and wind power systems store energies in batteries, but there's many other ways to do it. It's like sand batteries. You have water batteries. You have compressed air storage. You have volcanic rocks. These are just simple, cheap to do. Whenever they're not running at full capacity. During Alberta's recent cold snap, it was in fact solar and wind that prevented the grid from collapsing. And Alberta, anybody knows it gets down to minus 40 regularly there. Also, to account for cloud cover on the lack, and Alberta has one of the biggest geothermal farms on the planet, where they're producing like 25,000 cucumbers a day or something in the middle of winter through geothermal. Also, to account for cloud cover, or a lack of wind, and he built it in 1 year. A lack of wind in one area. Wind and solar systems are spread out across multiple locations in a given area. And solar and wind can be built essentially wherever there's a chance of it being sunny or windy. In Ontario, nuclear power is effectively limited to being built only where plants already exist. Whereas renewables, you can put them just about anywhere. Nuclear advocates claim nuclear is still not needed because the wind and solar are intermittent and they need gas for backup. However, no, they can use geothermal and then use wind and solar for backup. However, nuclear itself never matches power demands, so it needs backup, wrote Mark Jacobson, the director of Stanford University Atmospheric Energy Program, in a recent testimony to the U.S. House of Representatives. And today's batteries are beating natural gas for wind and solar backup needs. But there's better solutions than batteries. Dozens of independent scientific groups have further found that it's possible to match intermittent power demand with clean renewable supply and storage without nuclear or fossil fuel at a lower cost. And when asked by a reporter why the province wasn't spending its money on renewables, Smith said simply that the spending on nuclear was the plan that made sense, which is a garbage can diagnosis, right? I'd like to ask the minister what he thinks weighs more, 100 pounds of feathers or 100 pounds of bowling balls. Because based on his statement, I suspect he might go with something other than they weigh the same. 2,000 megawatts of power is the same amount of power irrespectively of where it comes from. If Ontario needs to replace 2,000 megawatt nuclear plant, it doesn't need to build 10 times as much equivalent solar or wind, like Scumbag was claiming. He seems overtly confident in his rather poor case. Associate Fellow with the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex and the chair of the Nuclear Consulting Group. His discussions just doesn't make sense, as he puts it. He doesn't put any numbers on the refit, doesn't give any real info on the problems of refitting an aging plant. And these studies, which he said means replacing nuclear with renewables will require 10 times more wind, seem deeply problematic. It's a bald-faced lie to suggest you need 10 times more. An 11-year refit seems like a huge waste of time and funding because the prices are just literally free-falling for all the renewables. Nuclear is skyrocketing and always hideously behind schedule. If rebuilding the Pickering plant will get us 2,000 megawatts of nuclear power for $13 billion, roughly the same generating capacity cost to rebuild at Darlington, what might the same cost in solar and wind be? The answer is about $4.4 billion. And a solar plant that includes 2,000 megawatts generating capacity and 1,000 megawatts of battery storage. For the cost of rebuilding the Pickering plant in Canada, Ontario could build solar plants generating 3 times as much electricity. Or it could replace the Pickering plant 2,000 megawatt generating capacity with a fully renewable plant for 1/3 the cost of rebuilding the disease factory known as nuclear. And last but certainly not least, there's the safety and security issues. Some Canadians like to boast that the nuclear response team to the Bruce Nuclear Generating Station has won the U.S. Nuclear National SWAT Championship 4 times in a row. You know, the La Hague in France reprocessing facility has 500 security guards. 500. It's unbelievable. They don't want your team taking pictures of the sky, let alone the site. It's worth considering as well that if solar farm or wind turbines were targeted, they'll break and lights would go out. The bombing of a nuclear plant would be a much bigger problem. So these are just, it's horrible that the industry would say, oh, well, they might target the solar farms and the wind turbines. Ontario has 2 serious nuclear incidences, and they were both at Chalk River Laboratory. Well, no, we had a lot more than that at Darlington and Pickering, too. They contaminated the Great Lakes. They're contaminated for at least another 120 years. We're only talking about tritium. And the numbers we're talking about are just off the charts. And if you go look up in my videos, I've done a 3-hour presentation just on the Canadian CANDU reactors and their emissions. And anybody in their right mind that watched that would demand that they shut these plants down too sweet. At least one could be described as a partial meltdown. No, it is a partial meltdown. They actually grouted it into place. They abandoned it like a coward nuclear industry would do, right? Pickering operated provincially owned Ontario Power Generation, attested that necessary safeguards are in place. We've heard that constantly. They had necessary safeguards at Fukushima, necessary safeguards at Santa Susana, necessary safeguards at Mayak, necessary safeguards at Windscale, United Kingdom. And the list goes on. Our stations operate inside the strictest of standards and regulatory requirements to ensure our communities are always safe. No, the minute you put fuel into the fuel pool, they're still splitting atoms, and that's hemorrhaging into the environment. You can't contain it. It's genocide. The fuel pools are genocide machines. They're not just disease factories, they're genocide machines. And it's not just cancer. The Canadian Environmental Law Association, actually, they're pretty proud of these guys. Very, very rare we get stories like this showing up. Wrote in the press release in response to the Ford government decision, for that reason, high population areas and operating commercial nuclear plants are incomparable. Burn, eh? The homeless are workers are fighting to repair the crippled nuclear plant. The homeless. So this is, I'm going to play this clip for you. This is about a 40-second clip. And I think this is like 10 years old or something when I created it. And these 4 clips, they're all claiming that they're in the fuel pool of the building to your left that doesn't exist. Like, it's such an important video. I know it's hard for people to wrap their minds around it, not familiar with this topic, but they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. Why do you think they're doing that?
What I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So these people should be arrested for committing crimes like this. The people the producers at ABC Australia, CNN, BBC, and CBS should be arrested. These are unequivocal crimes. To suggest you're in a building that don't exist in order to disarm you from coming up with solutions. They stop the world from having a future is what these despicable parasites actually done to us. Nuclear war would cause billions to starve, but seaweed could save us. Like, what are you talking about, man? Like, the seaweed in all the studies we looked at are unbelievably contaminated. They aggregate the radiation, for Christ's sakes. Excuse the language. Is the solution to killing everybody. The radiation poisoning that would follow if you died from in the event of a nuclear war, if you didn't die from the initial blast, the radiation poisoning that would follow would get you, right? Or the radiation poisoning. But we had lots of nuclear wars they're called nuclear testing. So all of these, they had 50 tests up there. Imagine Russia and Ukraine firing 25 Nagasaki, or these bombs were huge, by the way, massive nuclear weapons at each other. So instead of firing at each other, how about Russia and Ukraine just detonate the bombs on their own countries, and then we call that a nuclear war? Because that's the same thing, right? That's the exact same thing. It's the exact same weapons and the exact same radioactive fallout. And so if you go back pre-nuclear industry, that's where you start to see the decline of all the species, the salmon, the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, and everything else. Thermonuclear bombs can be hundreds of thousands times stronger than the atomic counterparts. Like the Soviet Union biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time because it was a plutonium bomb, right? the bomb, or whatever they call it. So, if you got two countries with 1,800 Nagasaki bombs, 15 kiloton bombs, and they fired them at each other, is that a nuclear war or not? And so is the radioactive fallout the same radioactive fallout? Just because you call it an experiment, that doesn't mean the radioactive fallout is any different. The Bikini Atolls was equal to having a Nagasaki or a Hiroshima bomb. Nagasaki bomb, because it's plutonium. Hiroshima was a uranium bomb. So the Marshall Islands was equal to getting a Nagasaki bomb every day for 12 years. And the French Polynesians, what the French done to the French Polynesian, was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years. But the French used, the Americans used the Marshall Islands for the thermonuclear weapons, right? So the Ivory Mike is 10,000 kilotons. 1,000 kilotons is a megaton, right? And so Hiroshima was a 15 kiloton. So divide 15 into 10,400. I'll help you do it, actually. So take 10,400. 10,400 kilotons. And divide that by 15 kilotons. Is 693 Nagasaki bombs. That's what Ivory Mike was, equal to 693 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. 693. And that wasn't the only bomb. The Castle Bravo bomb was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki's. So when you see these numbers like 50,000, the taser bomba, that was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs. That's just a single bomb, right? And this is just a fraction of what they've done. The common spent fuel pool at Fukushima was being sprayed with water containing 6,375 spent nuclear fuel assemblies. 6375. 209 6375 times, there's 100 fuel rods. Each one is 12 feet long, weighs 18 pounds. So times 1,800 for each bundle. So that's 11.4 million pounds. That's gone. 11.4 million pounds is gone at the spent fuel pool. And common spent fuel pool is right behind, you can see over there, reactor 4. And reactor 4, that's reactor 4. And common spent fuel pool is right behind. Now that's the official picture in 2013 of the top of the building. Obviously that's a fake, right? Water could get sucked out of the fuel spent pools by tornadoes exposed to nuclear rods, said Japan government expert in 2012. But it was obvious the spent fuel pools were gone in reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. They were suggesting that they were exposed to the environment, see? And this was pure propaganda to keep the fable alive. That's what that was all about. It's 100% propaganda. So the media pretending that they're in the fuel pool, they're doing that because this is an extinction level event. Not because they're bored or not because they're getting paid a bunch of money. They're doing it because it's an extinction event. And they want to blame it on your tin cans, your pop bottles, and your cardboard. Breakthrough nuclear fusion experiment confirmed to have produced more energy than was put in. So let's go back 3 years. And he said they got more energy than they put in. And so when they come out and said it was equal to a 9-volt battery, extra energy. And I couldn't believe it. People were out there celebrating. The media was out there. Oh, this is fantastic. And I was like, what are you talking about? Static electricity from 270 million degrees Fahrenheit temperatures is going to produce more than the energy of a 9-volt battery. So then the following year, they said it was enough to boil 60 kettles of water. Enough excess energy they got back. Like how much water can you boil at 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, first off? And then how can you quantify, because first off, you're trying to boil water to power 1 million homes, right? Or more than that, actually. So how much water does it take to power a home, boiling water to take to power a home, first off? And how can you quantify that you got 60 extra kettles of water? And then the experiment last year at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where they suggested in December the 5th, I think it was, that they got more energy out again than they put back in. They tried to repeat that and they couldn't. And recently they said they did, but the reality of it is, why didn't they show us the documentation? Because, they didn't, right? So the breakthrough nuclear fusion, the reason nuclear works in space, on like the sun, is because it can expel excess energy millions of miles out. But on Earth we can't do that. And when they say there's no worries about a meltdown, but if I heat something up to 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and I'm boiling enough water to power several million homes, and something goes wrong, do you really think for 1 second that's not going to go bang? And another thing is you're going to try to control. You're going to have temperatures minus 300 degree Fahrenheit temperatures or Kevlars. You're going to have pressures that are enormous, and you're going to have temperatures that are unbelievable. And so they don't know. This is simply the whole thing is one great big experiment to see if they can control it for a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second. That's their holy grail right now, is a fraction of it's a millionth of a second. And this could be a trick of the equipment that has never been tested at these capacities before. So the equipment could be flawed in every sense of the word, and it could be flawed on purpose to manipulate, hoodwink investors from investing in something that simply can't work. Instead of giving you actual material, they give you impressions, artists' renditions. Saskatchewan Power and General Electric, I think it is, agrees to cooperate on the boiling water reactor 300 megawatt advancements in Saskatchewan. Well, you can agree with these memorandum of understandings, but if you don't have it, if it doesn't exist, then you can't quantify your assertions, then you should just shut up. The ruined Fukushima nuclear plant leaked radioactive water, but none escaped the facility. Ha ha! Ho ho! Does anybody ever get sick of that assertion that nothing got out? So they allegedly had a leak, and I don't got no idea what they're talking about, because the reactors were gone by day 6. So they don't want you to look there, they want you to look at the tanks, right? Don't look at that, because if you look at that, they're not going to say everything is in the tanks and show you that picture. They're not going to stand in front of that picture and says, nothing got out of the reactors. But that's what they're doing. But they can't do it if they show you that picture, right? And there's only 2 of the reactors. And there's 4 fuel pools missing, too, from that picture, right? The ruined Fukushima, all of these are Mari Yamaguchi. Mari Yamaguchi, we know, all the way back to 2013, is the cover story for the nuclear industry. Whenever you see Mari Yamaguchi, the story is only there for one simple reason. It's the cover story for the nuclear industry. That's who Mari Yamaguchi actually is. The ruined Fukushima nuclear plant leaked radioactive water and none escaped the facilities, except that everything got out of the facilities. Nothing is in the facilities anymore. Everything was gone by day 6, by March the 17th. The ruined Fukushima nuclear plant leaked radioactive water, but none got out. Mari Yamaguchi. The pool of water was wiped off the floor, 5.5 tons. They sent in a couple of homeless. They wiped it all up, Dana. If you don't disrespect the nuclear industry, you need to go back and start the video over again, because you will if you watch the truth. You'll see. Radioactive water, this is Euro news. Euro just come out and called nuclear clean. So you really think they're going to rat out nuclear? The International Atomic Energy Agency, the third biggest donor is Japan. Do you really think they're going to rat out Japan? Japan gives them absurd amount of money every year. No questions asked. And I mean that. No questions asked. Leaked from a valve left open during cleaning work at the absorption tower. And this is interesting. This is the first time that I've seen them mention the series system. They mention the series system in one of these stories, a couple of them actually. From a SICEM, which is a British terminology, absorption tower at the plant. And after all these years, since 2013, this is the first time we heard him mention the word the series system. Well, the cesium-137 isotopes are the exact same size as plutonium. There it is there, the series treatment machine. Now, how come we've never heard tell of that since 2013? Look, let me explain this to you again. How this actually works, this whole scam they're using on you about the ELP system. They got a nice little short, neat package of telling the story. So 2013 was the last time we heard the word Siri. I was shocked when I seen it today. I was like, what? I almost missed today because you're just so used to the propaganda. April 21st, 2014, 3 years, 1 month after Fukushima happened. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably, which meant that in 3 years they couldn't filter any water. They can't filter it anyway because you're talking around 10 sieverts per liter. You can never change the filter. You can't even walk over the pipes or the hoses from the tanks to the system because that's lethal doses. So 3.5 years after Fukushima, August 12th, 2014, TEPCO to abandon the REVA system, which is the same system as the series system, or the ELP system. And for the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. The groundwater bypass operation 2014, 3 years and a couple of months later, was still, what they were going to do was they're going to catch water coming down the mountain and pump it around the site directly into the ocean so it didn't run through the buildings and add to the inventories, right? September 18, 2013, TEPCO failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence to restrict the contamination and radiation from leaking into the... Every time you hear the word leak and you just want to kick the shit out of somebody in the nuclear industry. They're going to cost $1 billion. He says that he couldn't do it. No, you can't do it. You can't build a fence to stop radiation. And they don't even have the balls to acknowledge it. TEPCO admits the ice wall won't stop groundwater. It's worse than that. The ice wall will cause neutron reflection, which could cause a criticality and melt down the ice wall. And not to mention a nuclear meltdown at the fence, at the ice wall. And why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real wall? Why would you do something that stupid? Because there was no intentions. So then the series system and the Korean system, which are right alongside of each other, which are basically in the incinerator buildings. And so anything left over gets incinerated, I would imagine. And the same thing with the series system they were talking about is at in the incinerator building at Fukushima. They admit that in one of those stories I was just showing you before we came back to this. TEPCO plans to dump the water stored at Fukushima Daiichi into the Pacific. 2013, January 24. That's the last time we heard of the series system until today. That's unbelievable. And not only that, back in 2013, they admitted that the plant has already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks. These are not leaks, these are hemorrhages. The buildings are destroyed. Like, you can't call this leaks. You can't look at these buildings and say that's a leak. And the media that uses it should lose their degrees for using that word. It's that egregious. It's that life-threatening. Because you disarm the population from being able to understand and comprehend the significance of the danger that we're in. We are in real danger. This is not a game. TEPCO apologizes for the leak. Again, to call anything a leak, like to call these things a leak, TEPCO is not even supposed to exist. TEPCO was nationalized by the Japanese government immediately. They went bankrupt right away. Right, and many people call for the removal of TEPCO, including the Fukushima prefecture. The reason TEPCO exists is so you don't blame the nuclear industry if the shit hits the fan, right? And so this picture is a very puzzling picture. This was another story, Japan nuclear Fukushima. This was a handout, one-time use from the Associated Press. So this picture is cropped it from the Associated Press. And you can see another guy stood up alongside of him over there, and it looks like somebody in the doorway over here. And this is allegedly the building where the current emissions came from. But he's in a paper suit, which, how are you going to protect yourself at a nuclear meltdown with a paper suit? It's absurd. Because you're talking about gamma shines, you're talking about X-rays and neutron bombardments and beta rays and alpha shines. Like 6-foot lead shields can't protect you. How the hell is a paper suit going to protect you? So it's obviously a homeless person. There ain't going to be no nuclear scientist who's going to walk around that site in a paper suit, I can tell you that much. And not only that, they're holding the proverbial plastic bag in their hand, which we got so many pictures of that type of scenario. These are not workers. These are the homeless or the destitute or the victims of society or the immigrants who don't speak the language that are given this for photo shoots, and then they go away and they say, well, we're going to give you $3 next week. Give me a call, and they die within 2 or 3 days. So the handout is a single-time use. A staff member examines air vents through which a plant worker found a leak Wednesday morning. A one-time use handout. You're going to use it one time. And so look at the black on this side of the picture and the black on that side, and then the white. So they chopped that picture. What were they trying to hide? Because to me, that doesn't look like the incinerator building, which is where allegedly that system is too. It looks like that's the pump house on the seaside. But you can't tell. So even when I zoom in, but see, this is emblematic of the pump house, these big steel sheets on the floor, right? And cement. And so that's why they cropped everything out, so I couldn't identify it. A handout with a one-time use. Well, why a one-time use, though? Are you afraid the loved ones might recognize the victim? Volunteers allowed into the quake-hit Noto Town. So, first off, they said we covered a story 2 days ago where they send in 170,000 military troops. So why do you need 7 or 8 volunteers in the community for? In Ishikawa Prefecture, in the Noto Peninsula, including the cities of Nanao, which is on the east side of the peninsula, and Suzu, which is the northern tip of the peninsula, the Noto Peninsula. And Suzu is where they said there's over 4,500 homes collapsed. But yet the Shika nuclear power plant on the Noto Peninsula, that community alongside of it was the biggest earthquake they can have on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. And we got everybody telling us that story. And I covered that extensively for the first 30 days. 11 people had registered with the prefecture arrived in Noto on Thursday morning. Why do you need 11 people when you got 170,000 militaries? Because you don't have 170,000 militaries, right? And the roads are still not repaired. Volunteers start helping with the cleanup. And every time you see this scumbag, you know this is going to be just propaganda, right? So they got the volunteers to come out on the bus. They go there. And your job is to go out and pick up. There's over 2 million tons of debris to be picked up. And they got 7 people with little bags. And they got to go pick up some earthquake debris. If you put all 7 people in any of these houses, they're still barely going to make a dent into it. And then you got these guys are going to go in and reestablish the water. Now that could take them 4, 5, 6 months, but you got to start somewhere, right? But this is a 3,000 to 4,000 year old fault line that just ruptured for the first time in 3,000 to 4,000 years, and you've had over 1,400 aftershocks. And you dropped over 40,000 buildings just on the Noto Peninsula. So why would you go back in there and why would you rebuild when you know that earthquake now is going to snap again? And they admit that. We covered that in the first couple of weeks where the geologists, right, made this, and even the government said, you know, we're going to have bigger ones in the near future. And then the slippage was right across the peninsula, the Noto Peninsula, 150-kilometer fault line that ran under Shika, where it was a 7 out of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. In other words, the fault slip was very tiny compared to what's coming, and it's coming. Because we know that in 2019, before that, they were averaging 20 a year for thousands of years, small earthquakes, 20 a year. But in 2021, 2022, 2023, they were getting 8,000 earthquakes a year, small ones, but earthquakes. And so it was no big surprise that when it slipped in a big way, right? $2.4 million tons. And then I must get off my trail here. Right there. So Pray for Noto benefit brings acclaimed violinist to Vashon. The concert is free and open to the public with donations suggested. And she has an unbelievable amount of experience as a musician, man. I never got a chance to listen to any of her music, but I would imagine it's spectacular. She has so much experience. It's really something. And I love to see people like that get involved, because the government has basically abandoned these people, right? And there's been other musicians, we've covered that. So we're quite proud of her for doing that. Energy based on power of stars is set a step closer after nuclear fusion heat record. Again, this is just propaganda. This was the very last gig after 25 years or something. And he said he got 69 megajoules. So for the very last running experiment, they ran at a top speed, like a true scumbag nuclear industry would. And 5 seconds, energy over 5 seconds. 69 megajoules of energy over 5 seconds. Well, the equipment you're using is going to have this bad taste for at least 5 seconds after it experiences these fluctuations, right? It's absurd to suggest that it lasted 5 seconds. And there's nobody in the industry would actually say that. That's just the media hype in order to get them to invest in the next generation of stupid. Because this thing is stupid. A fitting swan song for the project. The burst of energy. And fusion reactions do not release greenhouse gases. Like, shut your pie hole, for goodness sakes. The amount of tritium committed to these things is despicable. It's despicable. It really is. And we covered that story at the beginning. Westinghouse and UK Community Nuclear Power collaborate to deploy a fleet of small modular reactors. Like, how are you going to deploy a fleet when you don't even have a single one built? I know it's based upon a current technology, but it's not that large reactor. It's a small one. And 300 megawatts is not exactly small. And again, they give you these idiotic designs, right? All the small modular reactor companies will give you these types of designs as if they're aesthetically pleasing, right? Just to lull you into complacency, lull you into acquiescing without no checks and balances. And they want no checks and balances. They really want no checks and balances, because otherwise they're going to find all these problems and shut it down, see? UK nuclear, first, anything that comes from the UK, you have to disregard it. You can't believe a word they tell you. Like, this is a country that closed down 9,400 farms after Chernobyl. Like, when you close down 9,400 farms because of radioactive fallout, you contaminated the water supply too. You contaminated every community, every automobile, every playground. You were supposed to abandon the country. In its final experiment for being shut down for good last year, the UK jet reactor set a world record for energy output of a fusion reactor. Again, they're looking for money for the next one. Why would you believe them? So 150 million, when it was temporarily the hottest point in the solar system, reaching 150 million degrees Celsius. It began operating in 1983. Well, it's not operating, these are experiments, right? These are just flashes here and there. So 150 million degrees Celsius is 270 million degrees Fahrenheit. First off, we don't have anything to contain 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. How are you going to contain 270 million? Work at the largest, United States' largest nuclear fuel factory planned to unionize. Oh, I can see a false flag happening over there. Nearly 700 employees at the Columbia Disease Factory fuel fabrication facility, 25 minutes southeast of Columbia. How many miles is that, I wonder? South Carolina. Well, I see 25 minutes. And we've covered that facility many, many times. They've had builds up of uranium. They've had to redo the floor. In fact, the workers there had to go in and put lead sheets on the floor to protect themselves. They've had endless releases into the community, into the local estuaries and lakes and streams. WIP is getting back up to speed since the meltdown in 2014, where they demonized me over that one in 2014. I covered that for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days. And KRQE in New Mexico actually took one of my clips and put it up on their TV station and called me a conspiracy theorist, when I was completely honest, completely accurate too. 489 shipments of nuclear waste made its way to WIP, the Waste Isolation Pilot Project, and I showed you that there not that long ago. This was a project, not plant. This was an experiment, right? And then when nobody's paying attention, they turned it into a facility. In 2023, breaking previous records. More nuclear waste was disposed of last year at a repository. These are not repositories, these are going to melt down at some point in the future. They melted down in 2014, spent $2 billion on it and another $6 billion. And we don't know where that one went to, the $6 billion. Then any other year since the incident in 2014 left parts of the facility contaminated. They said kitty litter, right? They said they had a leak. Every nuclear meltdown is called a leak right away. And someone should leak them next time they catch them. The Waste Isolation Pilot Plant disposes of transuranic nuclear waste. So they're talking about radioactive gloves and radioactive paper towels and radioactive mops. And apparently they got millions of tons of radioactive mops. It's so ludicrous. Their assertions are so ludicrous. In 2014, a drum sent for the Los Alamos National Laboratory ruptured in the underground, releasing radioactive material and causing a 3-year shutdown of the underground facility until the site reopened in 2017. Well, he closed off those caverns, right? So what they said happened in 2014 was they had a salt truck caught fire. Let me see if I can find it. I'm a sucker for punishment. Bear with me. I'll find original footage. We'll make a fun time of it. Everybody get out their marshmallows. We'll have a good old whip. The problem is I got too much in it. You might never find it. Here we go. Salt truck at Whip. I put on my ear muffs. I'm going to just... Oh, that's not the right clip. It won't play. Dope. That's okay. Hang on. One more kick at the can. Don't tell me like that, baby. Oh, that one's going to work. I'm going to drop the volume.
A fire has shut down the WHIP site in Carlsbad. Officials say a truck hauling salt caught fire about 11 this morning in an area underground. All employees were quickly evacuated, but several were taken to the hospital for potential smoke inhalation. WHIP officials say their emergency plan was put into place immediately.
See, and they spent $500 million replacing that vent fan. Because, you know, it's like a banana and a potato chip, right? But here's the truck fire. And so they evacuated 55 caverns. They're each the size of a football field because the front tire on a salt truck caught fire. That's the official story. But Mrs. Williams here, I'll leave the headphones on for this one. She's at a meeting with the local community about WHIP, and she's going to explain how much radiation got out of there. It's like licking an iPhone cord or something.
These levels of radiation are just above natural background at the WHIP site. And so there is no expectation that those measurements for you or your children or anyone else will show exposure on lung count. They're down in the levels of licking your iPhone charger. And I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to equate radiation exposure to something that you can understand.
You dumb hicks. You bunch of morons. Imagine telling you it was like licking your iPhone charger. And the thing with her is if you give her husband $50, he'd probably punch her out for you. Because you know that's what kind of people they are, right? Gretchen Whitmer seeks another $150 million to restart the Palace Day nuclear plant, which is now owned by Chris Singh, which is Holtec. And they are on the Great Lakes. They're on Lake Michigan. The reason you close down the nuclear plants when you do is because the containment is brittle. And it's brittle from decades and decades of neutron bombardments. They're very high pressure, over 1,000 pounds per square inch. And you can't have these 1,000 psi and very brittle at the same time, because if it goes, it's really bad, and it's really bad quickly, right? Nuclear fusion record provides hope, yeah. Hope for the investors to suck them in and steal their money, right? How safe is nuclear energy? Well, it's not. It's one great big stupid disease factories. Some countries, notably including Germany, remain fearful of another Chernobyl or Fukushima. Just all nuclear power plants, once you take some fuel out and put it in the fuel pool, that's the end of your safety. It's hemorrhaging radiation into your environment 24 hours a day. And they're always burping out through the tours huge amounts of radiation during normal run, and they all have incinerators on the site on top of that. Now, what do you think that's for? Despite some notable disasters, nuclear power is one of the least deadly sources of energies. Yeah, tell that to all the dead victims' families and see how that works out for you, you piece of shit. Kibaowik, and I'm going to butcher a few names, my apologies. First Nations launching, and bless their hearts, a court challenge to Chalk River nuclear waste disposal site. Well, whether they win or not, thank goodness they stepped up. An application has been made to the federal court for judicial review of the January 9th decision by the Canadian Non-Nuclear Safety Commission. And that river runs all the way down to the St. Lawrence, for goodness sakes. But they love, and there's this, we covered it so many times, They seem to revel in contaminating the native communities, and particularly their drinking water and their sacred and their feed and their berry grounds, their food grounds and stuff like that, and their resources. That's what these industries seem to be prolific at. So we're super happy they're doing it. And if you want to use me as a consultant, they should sometime. They should contact me if they can find me. And we can put together a plan of how to beat them in court I can beat them in court every step of the way. There's zero possibility they're going to beat me in court. And natives should reach out to me. I just put my phone number up for them. And if anybody knows them, send them my numbers. Every time I try to reach out and contact these people, I never ever get a reply. And I'm assuming that my email never makes it. Ukraine, a very real danger. Like, first off, the minute you see Rafael Grossi and Zelensky, these are the two biggest degenerate scum on human history. Rafael Grossi, like, he's telling you that his version that is lethal, he's telling everybody that these never melted down. So why would you want to trust this sack of shit that is claiming these never melted down? France's government, which is EDF, nuclear struggles dampen the EU nuclear prospects. This is why you see UK with all this hype about their fusion, their fake fusion. It's because of all the controversies right now from Hinkley Point C. Like, Hinkley Point C is going to be about $60 billion US dollars as it is right now. And it is nowhere near complete. It's the biggest construction project in human history. There's enough cement there to build a sidewalk to Rome. And only the best goes at this site, and everything is triply inspected on top of that. These are the biggest disaster machines to any kind of future for humanity. And they're guaranteed to exterminate the 8 million species through their constant emissions. They're a scourge on humanity. With one former EDF executive saying French's nuclear industry was on a slow descent to hell. It's on a slow descent to hell. And the last story of the night was this story. The Tupolev, which is still in the air, by the way, but it's not running on nuclear reactors. They actually put nuclear reactors on one of these things. And what they found out was that it was an experiment to see how irradiated the crew would get, right? But the problem was you had to put so much lead shielding on it that it couldn't fly, right? And you're talking about double blades, 4 sets of double blades, counter-rotating. You know that thing got torque and a half, right? But by the time you put all the lead onto it, you couldn't fly the bloody thing in order to protect the people that were on it. Thank goodness, these flying Fukushimas. Well, I guess we made it. So I got to go in tomorrow into the city and pick up some stuff. And James donated 130 last night, so that's a big deal. I got to go pick in. I got to pick up a double. A double hitch. It's two 2-inch hitches on top of each other for the truck, and I got to pick up electric fuel pump, gasoline pump, and a bunch of other little things. I can't get everything I want, but I'm going to pick up that stuff because it's on sale. If I don't get it now, I won't be able to afford it later. And so I appreciate everybody that donated and made that possible. We're going to come in and close up the poll here, wherever we're to. I thought we were on back on the screen. Is the non-existent fusion in small modular reactors one of the most idiotic solutions to energy besides nuclear? We got 100%. An outstanding. Yes, Dana, it's stupid. Thank you, everybody. Bless your hearts. Bless your hearts. And we sent out extra hugs for Stephen Young, and he's lovely, of course. I'm quite happy that he got some good news for a change, because for the last 3 years, Stephen Young has gotten no good news at all. So hope on its own is good news, right? But I really want you to watch the documentary, the THE, the Universal Antidotes. I'm using it myself, and this is amazing stuff. And it's not that expensive. You can get it on Amazon for about $50 for the 2 bottles. And it's worth your time to listen to that. And they provide all the notes too. If you go to the website, they provide all the notes with live links in the PDF. And it's up at my Telegram site too. Okay, so let's get some music going. We'll call it an end. I remind everybody, if you want to donate, you can donate at the 2 links from the very bottom of the description. My PayPal, you're directly to my PayPal. And the other one is to my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. That takes literally any kind of credit cards you can think of. But it also takes like Apple Card and Google cards and Netflix cards, stuff like that. It'll take from just about any country. There's a list of the different stuff that you can donate through my one site. So just scroll down my page a little tiny bit and you see a black donate button. You can type it in there, and if it goes through, it'll go through. We've never had an issue, by the way, donating through either one of these. And that site, my site's over 10 years old now. We've never had an issue. And every time we gather up enough money, we go pick up some more equipment. And this whole operation, we're trying to make it self-sufficient. And we're very close to doing that right now. So thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Everybody have a great night. A wonderful night, actually. A wonderful day tomorrow. And we'll see everybody, unless there's something happens, something major, we'll see everybody Sunday night. I'm going to try to get back to our regular schedule. So if I don't do a show tomorrow or Saturday, and come back on Sunday, I'll be refreshed, right? But I'm going to head into the city tomorrow and pick up the pieces of equipment that we can afford. And that makes me super happy, because we're protecting the research expeditions and everything else by doing that. Okay, well, have a great night, great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody, by the way. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far in the video. It costs us very little, and it might go a long way. And it might save people's lives, because the truth got a tendency to do that. Hugs for everybody. Take care now.